It's now 1:30. I will call the meeting to order of the McHenry County Zoning Board of Appeals. The first item of business, we had kept open the petition number 2023-002, the Shell House petition. Mr. Cozen had a question regarding a survey. There was then something brought forth from the Vanderstappen company regarding this, so I would just ask Mr. Cozen if he has anything else to add based on that response.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I received the material. I understand it was distributed to other members and is made part of the record, and I find it satisfactory to the question I had posed. I also thank the applicant and the board for the time given to me to have my question satisfactorily answered.
Okay, so then with that, we will close the hearing portion of that petition, and we will move to the voting meeting for, this will be on...
Mr. Krusner, while you look up that information, do you want to verify that the members that were not here for the hearing portion have read the transcript?
Very good point. Okay, so we are opening the voting meeting for petition number 2023-002. This is a petition for reclassification from A1 Agricultural District to R1 Single Family Residential District. The applicant is Carol S. Larson, owner of record, and Trenton Joy Shell House, contract purchasers. The PIN number is 02-28-200-005. The address is O'Brien Road, Harvard. The property consists of 1 acre and is located on the south side of O'Brien Road, approximately 296 feet east of the intersection of Nolan Street and O'Brien Road in Alden Township. Now, for the hearing, we only had 4 members present, and today we have 7 members present. So I would just like confirmation from all of you who are not present that day that you have read the transcript.
Kurt Schnell, O'Reilly Township. I have read the transcript.
Jessica Beverly, Door Township. I have read the transcript.
Don Smolinski from Grafton Township. I have read the transcript.
Okay, thank you. So then at this time, I would take a motion
So
regarding
moved.
this, moved by Mr. Eldridge,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Gardner, to approve this petition. Mr. Eldridge?
Yes, I made the motion for the purposes of discussion. I am in fact going to vote no in this petition. I believe the testimony of the petitioner that he wishes to maintain the property in a fashion that I would approve of. I think he is a nice person. I think that his attorney made as good a presentation as possible with the facts he had. But quite frankly, I think if this petition were approved, we might as well tear up the residential portions of the Uniform Development Ordinance, because this is explicitly contrary to the provisions therein. The testimony as to whether this was suitable for agriculture established perhaps that it was not suitable for row crops, but at least in my view, since it had been used for grazing for a good many years, and grazing, as I understand it, is agriculture, it is perfectly suitable for that. One of the essences of our planning and zoning for residential in unincorporated areas is that there were a great many mistakes made by previous zoning boards in permitting isolated homes and even isolated subdivisions in agricultural areas, and that was inappropriate, and that we wish to maintain our agricultural area as much as possible. And this particular subdivision was in fact part of the discussion of that point when the 2030 plan was adopted in the first instance, that this was an example of a isolated subdivision that should not have been permitted in agricultural areas because it is too far away from utilities, and simply was an encroachment upon the desire to keep substantial portions of the county in an agricultural fashion. And given that, I see no reason to vary from the requirement in an agricultural district that a house requires 40 acres, and I see no argument for rezoning this parcel from agricultural to residential 1 acre zoning. And for these reasons, I oppose the petition.
Okay, we're going to start on my right also for comments, starting with Ms. Beverly.
I have no comments.
Okay, Mr. Schnabel.
I have to agree with much of Mr. Eldridge's narrative. As much as I can understand property owner wanting to use property in basically any way that they see fit, we are here working with the Unified Development realities, and as such as they are, this would be setting a horrible future precedent for virtually any property owner to cite this as an example why they would also need an exception. And basically that's why I at this time cannot support this petition.
Ms. Gardner.
Although I agree with my colleagues, I also feel that this is not totally unsuitable, being that it is very close to a residential area, as much as an anomaly as it is there and will remain there. There is a chance that in the future this will all become residential in some form. This to me is not much different than an A1, although it can't be an A1 given the circumstances. So I'm not totally against it, but I'm not entirely for it either for the reasons that have been stated already. So I'll hold on my opinion.
Mr. Smolinski.
Yes, I agree with most of what Mr. Eldridge has already spoken with regard to this. I consider this to be a classic case of spot zoning, and I just agree that this is not in the future land use map for the county, and as such I will oppose the petition.
Mr. Cozen.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Looking at the standards of the Unified Development Ordinance that's been appended to the application, specifically element D, in terms it is a balancing act and admittedly a difficult one between the relative gain to the public as compared to the hardship imposed by the applicant. A line has been drawn on O'Brien Road, and apparently that line has existed for almost 45 years. And nothing that has been brought forward in the application shows a need to move that line to another zoning district. For that reason, I will not be supporting this application.
Madam Chairman, may I add to my comment?
Sure.
I just want to say that I think that granting this petition would do no particular harm of itself if it didn't have importance as a precedent. And if I could isolate it completely from all future activity, I might be inclined to support it, but I think it does provide a precedent, and a very bad one, and that really is the core of why I am opposing it.
And I would totally agree with you, Mr. Eldridge. That was my big issue with this. I remember historically when we were doing A2s and without a home on the property and in a rural area, and we started getting 6-sided pieces just to try and meet the requirements to put a house in an agricultural area, and we decided no, we could only do that in an agricultural area if we had a home, and that was an effort to maintain the agricultural areas of the county as agricultural, and so that's why that was changed. And otherwise, this would be an A2 request, I'm sure. But the county felt that they wanted to really, it's been a strong belief on the part of people in this county to keep the agricultural areas agricultural in nature. And so I think this would be a horrible precedent in our land use to allow this in this area. There's been no trend of development in this area except agriculture. This isolated rural estate, residential zoning to the north dates back many, many years, and so this would be a dangerous precedent. So I agree with my fellow board members, and I will be voting against this petition. So I will take the vote now. A vote no is against the petition, a vote aye is for the petition. Mr. Eldridge?
No.
Ms. Gardner?
No.
Mr. Cozen?
No.
Mr. Schnabel?
No?
Mr. Smolinski?
No.
Ms. Beverly?
No.
And I will vote no. So this will go, or this is a vote 7-0 against approving this petition. So at this point, I would take a motion to deny.
I move to deny.
I'll second.
So I will take the vote on that. Mr. Eldridge?
No, yes.
Yes, so vote yes is to deny the petition on this one. Ms. Gardner?
Yes.
Mr. Cozen?
Yes.
Mr. Schnabel?
Yes?
Mr. Smolinski?
Yes.
Ms. Beverly?
Yes.
And I will vote aye as well. So this will go to the county board with a 7-0 vote denying this petition. So at this point, we will move on to the second portion of our meeting, which is another petition. Just give me a minute and I will change.
You would regret it down the road.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second item of business is petition number 2023-004, and it's for a text amendment. And this is proposed amendments to address the new state requirements for solar and wind energy facilities. So this is brought forth by staff, and so I'm just going to turn it over to staff to give us some background on this.
Okay, thank you. So as you all probably read, the state of Illinois has decided to regulate solar and wind commercial facilities in the unincorporated areas. So this state law applies only to unincorporated areas, not to municipalities. And in the state law, they have specified some siting requirements and also some process requirements in determining the land use appropriateness of these kinds of facilities. And they've dictated those standards to the counties. They also, as part of the act, stated that if your zoning ordinance isn't in compliance with these standards, you have to bring it into compliance within 120 days of enactment of the law, which brings us to May 30th, that we are supposed to have the UDO consistent with what the state law provides. So a few of the things that changed, the procedural changes, are you guys are accustomed to when it gets, any conditional use gets to you, it's been to the full staff plat review process. Because the state law says from the time someone applies for this land use to you guys have to start your hearing process is only 45 days. We're limited to 45 days. So that doesn't leave us time to schedule out for a staff plat review meeting and go through that entire process. So what we're changing process-wise is that when we get an application, we will still send the application to all the individual members of the staff plat review committee, and they'll give us written comments, and we'll include those in your packet. So you're still going to get their comments, but we just have to do it a little bit differently than we had been. Another thing that Kim just brought up earlier today is our 45-day time limit that we have of getting these things scheduled created a little bit of a hassle with the 3 that you guys are going to be hearing in April. And Kim has spoken to several applicants that plan to be making applications soon. So we are scheduled through what day?
Through April 30th, I think, at this point, through the end of the week.
So we're already scheduled with hearings through April. So the question that we have is staff to you guys, which is a little bit, maybe a little off topic, but we need some direction, is as these come in, should we try to double them up with hearings that are already scheduled, or should we go to having Wednesday meetings again in order to hear the solar farms?
I'd be in favor of Wednesday until we know how long these are going to take us. I mean, if we get so we can knock them out fast, then I'm happy to double up.
Yeah.
But since we have such a time limit, we better have enough time during the hearing that we can actually have the hearing and get done with it. At least that's my view.
I agree.
How many are we talking, Renee? I can't.
Well, you've got 3 on April 6th. Those are all the same developers, so we'll see how that goes. I've talked to probably 4 or 5 different companies that are looking to apply probably pretty quickly here in the next month or so, I think.
Okay, let's take a poll from the rest of the group. Anybody opposed to meeting on Wednesday? Hearing none, let's go with Wednesday.
Thank you. That gives us the direction we need so we can get these things scheduled. The next thing, the other problem that we've had too with the scheduling is because our county board only meets once a month. Once you guys close the hearing, we only have 30 days for the county board to take action as well. So we've had some issues with scheduling that too. So you might need to work with us a little bit on getting these things scheduled so we can make sure to meet those timelines. The law is also very clear that those minimum siting standards that they have put forward, that if a petition comes through, an application comes through, and they meet those minimum standards and they have their AMA in place, then...
Which is the Ag Mitigation Agreement.
Correct, yes. Then the county board really can't say no to the land use. So What we don't know a lot about is how this changes the permitting process. The law's a little more vague about that, but it's not vague about the approval of the land use itself. So I put in your memo, there's a chart that shows the differences between.
Can you show us a page? Oh,
Is
on
the
page
second
2?
page of the memo.
Okay.
There's the differences between the citing requirements of the state law and our current UDO. Here, do you mind?
Yes.
And then let me read what the last thing is. The last thing is decommissioning. So, thank you. So, they've changed, our ordinance requires 150% decommissioning bond to be held on these things and to be paid up front. The state law allows only 100% decommissioning bond. They also allow the salvage value to be taken out of the engineer's estimate, which we don't currently allow now, because that seems a little too.
Amorphous.
It does. So, and then it also doesn't allow us to require the full bond amount up front. It's like, there's a schedule that's over about 10 years that they get to the full bond amount. So that is another big change.
And there's nothing we can do about that. It's just going to be a lot more lenient than we proposed, okay?
Correct, yes, yes. So that's the big picture. So I don't know how you want to go through if you want to go through the red line, or if you guys just want to ask me questions about what specifics.
Well, I'll ask the board members, because a lot of, I mean, would it be easier for you to go line by line, or are you comfortable with just big picture? I know there's a couple issues that I'm concerned with, but not all of them, but I don't know about the rest of you.
I'd like to hear each of the lines.
Okay, all right, let's go line by line.
Okay, so the first section is the definition section. And the state law defines what a commercial solar energy facility and a commercial wind energy facility are. So what's proposed here is just striking our old definitions and including the new state definitions. Now, the way the ordinance was written originally, there is the large wind energy system you can see here, and then there was a mid-size and a micro. And we discussed that amongst ourselves, and we're really kind of confused about what the purpose of that was. So we're proposing to just remove those two categories, and we're treating the wind the same as the solar. You either have a commercial solar energy facility or you have an accessory solar panels, and we regulate them that way. And same with wind. So you could have, the one turbine on your farm, and that's regulated through the accessory uses section.
And that doesn't require, the statute doesn't require us to make changes in that?
No, the accessory stuff, nothing has to change there. It's just the commercial facilities
Okay.
that the state law applies to. Okay?
Yes,
And-
Mr. Posen.
Thank you. So when I compared the definition as proposed with the definition in the statute, it was different. And maybe I'm reading from a different section, I admit that, is, my statute section is section 5-12-020, A as an apple, commercial solar energy facility. And it cross-references the Illinois property tax code. What struck me was that the two types of energy facility actually have distinguishable basis in comparison. One is based on the quantity of energy created, which is the wind, and the other is based on who is acquiring the energy, and that's what got me down this rabbit hole. And I don't want to drag my fellow members, and I know they've kicked and screamed at me many other times. So if this is...
Not outwardly.
No, I understand what you're saying, and it is a little bit different. And that's because we also describe what an accessory is, and it has the amount of energy collected, which is consistent with the tax statute.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, we'll move on.
All right. So then the next thing is we're adding in the acknowledgement that we have to get any solar energy facility application to you guys within 45 days.
Yes.
Well, it actually says we have to finish within 45 days.
We changed that to commence, to conduct.
Conduct, okay.
Because that's a little bit of a question mark right now as well, of whether we have to just get started, and then if you guys continue, that's okay. That's another question. We have a lot of questions, or have had, out to the state's attorney, and we'll have a lot more.
Go ahead, Mr. Posner.
Thank you. And this is apropos the initial discussion of the timeline. The existing language of the section references calendar days, but the proposed addition just says 45 days. This is reflective in other portions throughout. Are we measuring from calendar days?
Calendar,
or-
yes, that should be amended to say calendar days, yes, thank
And then I
you.
would spare my members of citing that elsewhere throughout this
Yes.
subject. Thank you.
Good catch.
Yes. All right. And then the next one is under the action of the county board that they take the matter up within 30 calendar days as well. And those are just requirements that the state laws imposed on us. All right. And then under procedure, it's the sending, staff will send out the applications to all the members of staff plat review. And we're asking that they get us comments within 14 days. So that is acknowledging what I said about the change to how we get it to staff plat review and how we take comments from them. And we'll pass those on directly to you guys.
And would they be able to allow questions of an applicant by writing and have their response before we would hear it, or would that just be their comments?
If there's time, they can ask questions and get their responses.
And otherwise, they can provide us with a list of questions they would like addressed during the
They
hearing?
could, yes.
Okay, that would be
Yes.
great. Okay. And again, we're gonna say 14 calendar days.
Calendar days, that's right. Okay. And then next is just the changes to the use chart. So like I talked about before, we took out those categories of wind energy systems that, I mean, we haven't had anybody propose anything like that, and we're, as staff, a little unclear on what those categories were actually meant to be. So we just have the two categories, commercial solar energy and commercial wind energy. And then we're allowing them by conditional use in the ag districts and the industrial districts. And solar was allowed by conditional use in office prior, so we just left that alone. But the state law says any ag district, industrial district, you have to allow for this land use.
but we don't have to allow it by right, it can be conditional use.
It has to be conditional use because the state law also requires a public hearing
Okay.
before you approve them. So we'll meet that requirement by going through the conditional use process.
Okay.
Okay. Then I think the next change is just changing the name. And then in application, we added that they have to have their agricultural mitigation, impact mitigation agreement as part of their application to us. The state law reflects that too. In fact, the state law pretty much says that what they're going to be held to and what we can hold them to, and no more than, is what is in the AMA. So we will have the AMA before, I don't know where, we question whether it has to be executed, but we'll at least have the agreement when it comes to you guys, and you'll see that.
And so as part of that AMA would be like a drain tile survey, but you don't know if like that would have to be executed before it would come to
And
us?
the AMA doesn't require a drain tile survey,
Oh, okay, okay.
so.
How about, we had that correspondence from the defenders regarding the native plantings and maybe requiring that in the application versus, I mean, did you read that? Is that something that you think we could add into here, or?
Well, we looked at it, and the other part of their comment was that we leave in the plan for maintaining, and we agreed with that. I admitted I might have got a little overzealous with my red pen, so we're leaving that unchanged. So that will be the same as it is now, which is they have to provide us with that maintenance plan prior to permit. So I understand that the defenders were asking that we change that to the time of application, but with conversations with the state's attorney's office, we as staff don't think that it's a good idea to change that, because the 3 that you're going to be hearing in April, those came in, was it the day the law was enacted,
It was
or?
a couple days after.
Okay. So those, because the law was very clear that said, as soon as this law is enacted, you use these standards and not your own standards anymore. So Kim took 3 applications in right away. And so we actually asked the state's attorney, if we don't think these applications are complete, or we want more information or whatever, can we ask them? And the answer was no. Once we accept the initial application, it's done. The 45-day clock starts ticking. So with that being the legal advice that we've gotten before, I would just hesitate to take that requirement and move it from before the permit is issued to before the land use is approved. Because I just don't think we're on solid ground with that, if that makes sense.
Okay, so maybe later on then, when we're going through this, you'll find the place where that
Yes.
can be. Okay. Anyone, Mr. Kozen? Yeah, go ahead, Don.
Yeah, with your comments that you just made on that, Renee, so receiving the application, if they don't have any of these 3, A, B, and C in the application, does that mean we still have to accept it and the time period starts if they have none of those 3?
That was the advice we were given, but I would argue that. But that was the advice we were given. Because because what we have here is provided for in the state law. So these 3 items, the state law says you have to have your AMA, you have to have your EcoCat application, and you have to have a site plan.
So the application starts if they just walk in the door, essentially, is what the state's attorney's telling us?
If we accept their application,
What if we don't accept it?
that's, a
You know,
good
because
question.
right away you could say, oh, they don't have any of these three, no, we're not accepting it.
Yes, and we would turn them away if they
Okay.
didn't have these three, because like I said, those three are backed up by state law. That's what state law requires
Okay.
for application.
Okay, that's good.
Do you have all these now for these petitions?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
They should
Oh,
have.
thank you.
All right, go ahead,
If,
Bob.
if we can go back to the section PP, the strikeout removes the time limit, and it said shall have no time limit. Does that then mean that the only way a facility would end, or a conditional use would end, is through the abandonment process?
Correct. And that's how all of the solar farms that have been approved to date, which is 30 some odd, that's how they've all been treated. So that's just consistent with the way that we've treated
Yeah,
every other petition.
Just a grammar matter. I think in the second line, you shouldn't have struck out unless, because
Oh, and Kim caught that for you. So it isn't, and if you look up here, we left.
I can't read that.
Oh,
I can read
sorry.
this, but-
Sorry. Yes, Kim caught that for me, so it's, yeah, we have.
No, it's still
unless.
listed. Oh,
It's there, but it's
But
not
they
struck
arrest,
out.
it's,
Yeah.
oh, it's
Yeah.
not struck out.
Okay.
Yeah. My red pen was on fire.
And,
So I have a, oh, I'm sorry, I
Yeah, go
thought you were
ahead.
done. I think Bob's not done yet.
Sorry, have we received, or has the county received requirement from the Illinois Department of Agriculture? Because it seems that some authority has been shifted to them in terms of they being available to do the review. And if you don't get the review from ag, who's got the skin in the game, so to speak?
For the AMA,
Yes.
yes, a lot, more emphasis, we've always required it, the state's always required it.
Right.
So we're accustomed to seeing it, but you're correct, the state law now puts a lot more emphasis on that document. So these applicants have to work with the state before they come to us,
Right. But
because they have to have that.
little editorial, it seems that we're a lot closer, Woodstock, than Sangamon County. Would we be getting do we have a process in place to tell the applicant it's not us, it's
The people that are applying for these are well aware.
good?
We've never had anybody question the AMA process, have we?
Right, and I think they just have to submit, and then the fully executed copy is usually submitted later in the process.
Before we issue the permit.
question.
Yeah, I do. I'm jumping ahead just a little tiny bit down to 2A under site design. And I noticed that the 300 feet has been struck and it's reduced to 150 feet, which concerns me a little bit. In the past, we've been able to kind of override the state requirements with more stringent requirements on our part. Are we not able to do that with this? Oh my God, okay.
Yeah. So if you look at the chart on page 2 of the memo, that one should be there, because that's one of the citing standards that changed, where we had 300, now it's down to 150.
Okay, may I say publicly, I don't like that?
You're not alone.
Okay.
I also have a question. Oh, sorry. In section E, as long as we're moving forward, it says all site development shall comply with the stormwater management ordinance. I didn't see anything about that in the statute, moving that.
That's another question mark that we have, because in the statute, there is language that kind of says that drainage districts don't have much control or power over these things. So we had that question to our state's attorney, does this affect our stormwater management ordinance at all? And they haven't given us a direct answer on that. So I struck this, but I have no problem if you guys want it in the ordinance, it's fine, because the stormwater management ordinance doesn't give us authority from the UDO. So if this is not in the UDO, it in no way means that if we can enforce the stormwater management ordinance, that we wouldn't be able to, because we took it out of here. So, and likewise, if the state's attorney decides that the state law says the stormwater ordinance can't be enforced, because it's in the UDO is gonna make no difference to that either.
Oh, I would prefer if we kept it in.
Okay,
I agree.
sure,
Yes.
that's no
Would you
problem.
like to make a motion to that effect?
Oh, can I make a motion that we unstrike the language in section E?
I would like to second that.
Okay, the motion is to remove the red line in number E under PP,
2E.
PP2E, yes, to remove that red line. Motion has been made by Ms. Beverly and seconded by Mr. Schnabel. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Would that be a similar discussion concerning the striking of the lighting and the solar panels being overridden by state?
Sure.
So we are not explicitly excluded from having those in there.
This, what the state
Yeah,
law
and-
says is that you can't impose higher standards than what the state law provides or AMA provides. But, I mean, what does that mean exactly? We don't really know yet until we get into it.
Okay, so
But
they
the
haven't
AMA
addressed either of these issues, is that what it amounts to?
Correct.
Okay.
The AMA doesn't get into lighting in it. The glint and glare, that's a kind of an old issue, I think, that's been solved. But if we want to leave those in, we can leave those in.
But we can't change the 20 down to 15.
We cannot, correct,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay,
I would move that we remove C and D.
so the motion is to remove the red line on C and D under
PP
PP
to
to
C and D.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Smolinski. Any other discussion? Okay,
Yeah, I
all-
just wanted to comment is, these are things that the public objects to in the hearings.
Mhm.
And so I think it helps us, with public opposition, to lighting and glare and things like that, because we heard it at the Duke Energy.
Yeah, and I don't think it really imposes any particular costs on the petitioners, because these are things that are routine to do today anyhow.
Any other discussion before the vote? Okay, all those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, motion passes.
Okay. So under F, we didn't do the no structures excluding power lines can exceed, our standard used to be 15 feet, but the state standard now is 20 feet. Then in F, there's an addition that acknowledges that the IDNR will be issuing standards for the pollinators and for the natives, and will be using those standards.
We don't have those yet, and this law's in effect, right? But we do have our own standards. So what's the plan with this application that's coming through now?
Actually, the IDNR does have standards.
Oh, okay. The
That are
links
out.
are all dead. I can't find them anywhere.
Oh, yeah. They have, the IDNR has standards. They have like a 2-page memo that's very similar
Okay.
to what we have. And then they also have the scorecard that they're required to use to meet the standards that are required in their AMA as well. So there's no question that they still have to do natives. There's still standards, the same standards for getting those natives
That's encouraging.
installed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that?
That answers my question,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yes. Could we spell out the acronym?
Yes, it's in my notes. It is in my notes. I caught that myself.
No,
I'm sorry. That's not, I learned
So
that
that's
in
the
planning
Illinois
school.
Department of Natural
Natural
Resources.
Resources.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes. See?
I know.
I learned that
I didn't
too.
want- I'm looking, who has sharp objects to my right?
That's a good point.
Yes, it is. That needs to be spelled out, and it will. The next one, again, is just a definition change. And under decommissioning as well, or abandonment. Under abandonment, we have 180 days that an abandoned facility has to be removed currently. But the AMA is 12 months. And the law says you can't require more than what the AMA requires. So that's just making that consistent there. Going from 180 days to 12 months for cleaning up the site if a solar farm is abandoned.
You said you can't require more, but you can't require less than 12? That's the, what
More
it
restricted.
actually
It
is.
has to be
Yeah.
consistent.
Okay.
Decommissioning, so we talked a little bit about that as well. That is the decommissioning plan. We still will require prior to building permit issuance. You guys, usually they've submitted them as part of the application, so I don't know if that'll continue or not, but we can't compel them to. But they'll certainly have to submit it before we will issue a building permit. And then this language just reflects what the AMA requires for decommissioning. It's 100% bond, down from 150%. It also allows salvage value, which we didn't allow before in the engineer's estimate. And it schedules that ramping up of that decommissioning bond over time.
Of course, even though they don't have to have it, we can surely question them on it when they come here for their hearing,
And
their decommissioning plan.
do we have to do it at a level rate over the 11 years, or can we front load it to some extent?
No, they're very specific with what percentage they have to put up in the first 5 years, and then I thought that we had that schedule in here. Do we have an AMA with us? It's actually in the AMA, but it's very specific.
In other words, it's mandated by state.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it does allow every 10 years for you guys to revisit them every 10 years and ask them for a new engineer's estimate, and you can increase.
So we'll actually be asking for a new estimate before they have completed making the
At the
deposits.
same time, I
Yeah.
think it is.
Yeah.
Well, 11 years,
Yeah,
this is
same
11
thing.
years, and every 10 years we get
Yeah.
another cut at the apple, bite of the apple.
Not necessarily for this hearing, but I would like to see the ag impact mitigation agreement that,
Okay.
I don't think it was included as part of this.
They should be
But I would like to
right
be
on
able to
my
see
desk
it.
on my computer if you want to. I have both the solar and the wind. AMAs.
Yep.
Yeah. So Kim's gone to get that, if she can find it on my
perfect.
desk.
Great,
And
thank
that's a big, yeah. But otherwise, they are on the ag website, the templates for them, so I can send you the link to them. Yeah. Because I looked at those too, to try to get our language as consistent as possible. And then the entire next section is the commercial wind energy. So don't let all the red lines scare you on this part. It just is basically because there was a lot of language about those different categories and that sort of thing that's been removed. But the big thing is setbacks on these as well. If you notice on the chart, I think we were at 220%.
20%.
State's down to 110%.
Yeah, and this eliminates the ability of municipalities to object in their planning area.
It does, yes. And most of the county is in a 1.5-mile jurisdiction. Yeah. There's very little property that's not within somebody's planning jurisdiction.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Has this item been appraised to the municipalities and so forth in any way so that they are aware that the consequences in case we get a letter?
Everybody that's involved is aware and is upset, and
Okay.
there's a lot of lobbying. I think that this law is probably going to be a little fluid. I think a lot of things will be changing and we'll get new orders as time goes. So I was also trying to make things as general as possible so we didn't have to come back every time the state decided to change something.
Thank
Oh,
you.
they'll screw it up in a fashion that we have to adjust. But this does read rather as if it were written by one of the lobbyists for the wind and solar energy companies.
Yeah,
Sure
you
does.
think? You think?
Yep.
And I think you were telling me it kind of passed like super fast, like,
did.
yeah.
And it wasn't expected to be signed, is my understanding, and then all of a sudden it was signed into law, so,
Yeah.
yeah, for whatever reason.
The old style Illinois way.
So, yeah, thank you. Thanks. She did find it. Wow. That's big. So we have an organization of zoning enforcement officials, county officials. So everybody's just been back and forth and back and forth. And there's been some talk about some state's attorney's offices suing the state, but that hasn't happened so far, so.
Okay, let's move on then.
Yeah, and then the change to like the guy wires and the anchoring and that sort of thing, that's language that I pulled straight from the AMA template.
It is.
And then the flicker. So we had 15 minutes per day as the maximum flicker with a turbine within 300 feet of a habitable building. But then that seems more generous than what the state has come up with, which is 30 hours per year. So that's fine. That's probably a move in the right direction there. I don't know why our standard was 15 minutes per day. That's a little generous, in my opinion. So that's what that one's about. And then the standards for those mid-size and large wind energy systems, we just kind of rewrote that whole section there, and it'll have to be renumbered as well. So we left the language like everything that has to do with the FCC and the FAA regulations. It seems like the state left that alone. If it's near an airport, the FAA is still in charge. They still have to review it. And any interference issues and things like that are still regulated by the FCC. So I left those unchanged in the standards. And then we changed the decommissioning, just copied and pasted the language from the solar. So it's consistent because the decommissioning you'll see in the AMA is the same for solar or wind. And we just made that language consistent.
I have a question. Under 18A, you're referencing mid-size, large-size, and micro wind energy systems. I thought we were eliminating that language from our ordinance.
Oh, and A, it's red, but the strike-through didn't happen for some reason, and that's supposed to be stricken.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay.
Not a good catch. That's why we all need to look at this. Everybody picks up something different.
I know.
My copy seems to have all your current changes, so
Oh, okay,
I just
that's
printed
good.
it this morning. Did you just,
Yes.
you edited it?
We just
Okay.
changed it.
all right, so
Yes.
that's mine.
Yes. All right, so the decommissioning languages should be consistent with what's in solar, and that's it.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions for staff on this? Yes, Mr. Closer.
Thank you. The variation section has been stricken in its entirety. Does it mean there is, under no circumstances, any elements of either solar or wind that can be varied?
I think that was just stricken because I didn't see the reason for it to be there. Because you can ask for a variation from anything except the use chart in the zoning ordinance. So they could still ask for a variation from any of the standards.
But I'm sorry, I'm reading it another way. Are we able to grant a variation? Or are we,
As long as it's consistent with the state law. Does that make sense? But yes, if they wanted to ask us, so for example, we had a variation request, I think, from Duke for the height. So if someone wanted to ask for a variation on the solar farm, on a solar farm for a 25-foot height limitation, then we could hear that. There wouldn't be anything, because it's not more restrictive, it's less restrictive than what the state requires. And the variation section of the UDO provides the authority for asking for and granting variations. I'm not sure why that was there, it just.
Well, it basically is saying you can allow a variation except for height, you know, and that sort of thing. We were saying, no, you can't ask for any variation
Gotcha.
for those things,
And the
so.
state says that you have to consider variations, or you can't impose additional standards for, where is that? I know it's the noise. Yeah, it's in the state law. So the height, the state took care of, 20 feet. That's the new standard. And then the, where it says that you can't be, no, on the wind part, we had some language restrictions on noise, and the state law very specifically said we can't regulate noise.
Wow.
Period.
Oh,
Or
That's part of
vibration.
these. Right.
Relating to these kinds of facilities.
The wind,
Yeah.
the turbines, yeah.
But can we still say that you cannot ask for a variation to increase the height beyond what the state is saying they could do? Can we say, no, you can't ask for that? Or they could still ask for it and we could just deny it?
Yeah, yeah.
so that was my next question. I don't know if I'm on or not, yeah. So basically, let's say, you know, a solar facility comes in and we just think it is the worst place ever, the worst idea ever. We're just gonna be the fall guys here, is that right? Yes. Your face is saying yes.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, we haven't gotten into it yet, so who knows? Maybe somebody can find a really creative avenue, and then we will consult with the state's attorney and let you know.
Okay, yeah, because I'm just, you know,
Yeah,
not looking forward to
basically, well,
this.
this is kind of like the cell towers.
Yeah,
Yes,
it is.
yes.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, because the state already kind of did that to counties with the telecommunications towers.
Yes, go ahead.
And for those of us who can reach even further back in technological history, the satellite dishes, which were 21 and 25 feet across in backyards at the time.
Yeah, the
Well-
federal government did that to us all.
Yeah, well, the granddaddy is the Railway Act of 1912.
Now that one is before my
Telling your
time.
age,
Exactly.
Anyone have any other questions regarding these text amendments or any other recommendations for changes? If not, are you ready to vote on
I
this?
think Nancy wants to make a comment.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, yes. Any comments from any members of the public? We'll start with Nancy.
You bet. And thanks for letting me talk. I'm, of course, representing the environmental defenders of McHenry County.
Nancy, would you take the microphone?
Okay.
Just flip that little lever up
Alrighty.
towards the microphone so that it's on.
I think Anna
Just-
turned them on, didn't she?
Oh, yeah, it's on.
It's on.
Okay.
Yes, my name is Nancy Sheetzel. I'm representing the environmental defenders of McHenry County. And again, thanks for letting me speak. You received an email from Renee yesterday with a memo in it from us. I don't know how many of you saw it, but if you happen to have, if you printed it out, you can now tear it up. And if you did read that memo, you will have noticed in there that we did not speak to the wind energy portion of this new state law at all because, well, we're not that concerned about it. I was part of the wind energy task force. Were you, Charlie? Several years back. And with all the speakers that came and spoke to us during our meetings for that task force, it became very aware, or we became very aware that McHenry County is not well sited for wind energy. So it's, our belief was that it's never going to be something that's really a big deal here. We really won't. There may be people that will put up the small wind turbines in their own yards, but we'll never have a big wind energy farm here. But we did have a couple concerns that we wanted to share with you, of course, about the solar farm issue. And the part that, if you read the first paragraph, I'm not going to read it to you, but if you read the first paragraph in our memo, we certainly do want to praise you. In fact, I don't know, I know at least 3 of you, I think maybe Charlie was a substitute at the time. Do you remember that very first solar farm application that came through? And that whole room of people that were not very happy. Remember that? But I don't think I'll forget that. But we spoke to you that day and we urged you to please go ahead and approve solar farms in our county and in fact approve them for to be located on farmland. And then we ask you in turn to go ahead and take every step necessary, or to recommend every step necessary to make sure that the farmland is protected so that when that solar farm is removed 20 plus years down the road, the soil will be in better condition than it is when you start. And we ask you to please require pollinator species to help be planted on those sites, to help our pollinators in the county. And, you know, we could go on and help protect our water resources through the deep roots with those pollinator plants and so forth. And you guys did it. You recommended to our county board that, and for those of you who weren't part of it then, these people did great, because they did require all of, or recommend to the county board to approve all of these requirements. And the environmental defenders actually see our county as one of the leaders in the state on our solar farm siting requirements. And so, of course, one of our concerns was when we saw the initial redlined document that had the part taken out about the stormwater management ordinance not being able to be applied, it was like, oh my gosh, talk about a horrible precedent. But then we talked to Renee and she assures us, you know, if it's in there, it's fine. If it's not in there, it doesn't really matter because the stormwater ordinance is a separate standalone ordinance. It's not contained in the UDO. It will apply no matter what. So that takes care of that. The other thing that we were concerned about though was this business about the vegetation management plan. And it's going to stay in there now, is my understanding, but from what I hear from Renee, it will be left in the, and I have to look at the terminology here, it's going to be left in the same location it was in originally, it was in the, okay, it was in the, oh, which part? Anyway, it was in a part that didn't make sense to us. And we instead are recommending to you, if you will agree to this, that it should be put into the section that is part of the application. And I'll mention that business about about you guys not being able to require anything as part of the application in just a minute. But Public Act 102-1123 specifically allows for counties to require such a plan. And they just worded it a little bit differently than we did here in McHenry County, because we called ours a Native Vegetation Performance Standards for Solar Farms Memorandum. And I'm going to give you all a copy of this in a little bit, just because some of you may not be familiar with it, and I think it would be great if you, even if you are familiar with it, it might be great if you would go over it again. But anyway, here's what the state law says. To maximize community benefits, including but not limited to reduced stormwater runoff, flooding, and erosion at the ground-mounted solar energy system, improve soil health, and increase foraging habitat for game birds, songbirds, and pollinators, a county may, I think that word may is very important, 1, require a commercial solar energy facility owner to plant, establish, and maintain for the life of the facility vegetative ground cover consistent with the goals of the Pollinator-Friendly Solar Site Act. And that's what Renee referred to a little bit ago when she talked about the checklist and all that the state has. And 2, the county may require the submittal of a vegetation management plan in the application. It says that right in their law, to construct and operate a commercial solar energy facility in the county. So we are recommending that you, well, 2 things. 1, we wish or urge you to reissue this Native Vegetation Performance Standards for Solar Farms Memorandum that was created in 2019, just to change the name of it, because the state, in the state law now, they call this a vegetation management plan. And if you reissued it with the 2023 date, of course, too, and then with that new name, it would make it consistent with the state law. So it seems like an easy thing to do. But also, we urge you to take that, the requirement about the vegetation management plan out from where it is right now, where the county has it right now, and place it in the application portion, because the state says you may do that. And some of you are probably well aware that if a solar farm company includes something like that in their application plan, they have obviously given a lot more thought, a lot more attention to the management of their vegetation than they would have if they wait till they get their permit and they're at the construction point. And I don't know if you know anything about native vegetation. They're going to have a much greater success over the 20-plus years of their solar farm if they, from the very beginning, plan on how they're going to manage it. It will actually be good for the solar farm companies because they'll have less weed problems, they'll have to use less herbicides, and we don't want them to use herbicides on these solar farms. So there's just a lot of good reasons to include it in the application portion. And the state used the word may. So it seems to me, and I don't know what the state's attorney is going to say about that, but may, to me, says you could put it in there, and then you'd be consistent with the state law. So that's our major thing we'd like to see you do, plus, reissue this and change the name. The only other last thing I'll mention is, I'm with you guys, or the defenders, I shouldn't say me, the defenders are with you guys, but this makes no sense that someone could come in and just say, we're funding an application and give you nothing, and that's their application. As Renee said, thankfully, they would turn them away. But it seems like you should be able to require some things from them. And it's weird that they even talk about things right there that you can require in the application process. So I just want you to be aware that, and it seems like there's such a hurry to get this through. And you actually have till May 30th or 31st? May 30th to get this decided. And I know it's a bit problematic because of the solar farm applications that have come in that you're going to be hearing in April. And I don't know how to deal with that. I can't even give a recommendation. But I do want to let you know this. Cindy Skurkud, which many of you know, has contacted, or she knew of a state agency. It's called, Great Plains Institute. And they have a zoning expert named Brian Ross who, through that institute, is actively working on helping counties in Illinois navigate these renewable energy siting issues. And very specifically, they're providing technical assistance to counties working on the language issues. And Cindy says she'll provide Renee with that contact information, and as soon as she receives that contact information, and then Renee can share that with you. But it makes me think that possibly, if you could somehow manage the situation with the applicants that you have in April, that if you could then wait to make your final decisions on the actual ordinance until that May 30th deadline, it'd be a great idea. But no matter what, I thank you for the votes you took today. You guys are on it again. Thank you for that. And also, even if somehow the vegetation management plan cannot be included in the application phase, it's going to be in here. So we're glad for that. We just think it'll be much more successful for the companies if it's included in their application, because they're thinking about it from the beginning. So if you don't mind, may I give you these and hand each one?
Please.
Yes.
So Renee,
Yes.
is there any issues that staff would have with these recommended changes?
Well, I just stand by what I had said before, in that the three items that we have under the application for the land use are reflected in the state law. When I read what was read there, it says the application for the construction and operation. So I kind of read that as you can require it before, in the building permit process, which is where we have it.
Oh, the application for the building permit, not for the zoning.
For the actual land use.
I have a question though, because like these seed mixes from IDNR are really not that specific, and our recommended seed mixes are very specific, and with good reason. They've been well thought out. And if we put it in the building permit process, then there's no time for the public to review those packets without great expense, and you know, there's no public comment on it, there's no input. It just seems like, I don't know, I would be in favor of moving into the application phase simply so the public could see it and have input on it.
Could I mention one more thing about that?
Sure.
One other reason we thought it could be moved, not only because of the way the language was written there, and Renee may be right, and maybe it is the application for the construction, I'm not sure. But in the language, the county already recommended moving the agricultural mitigation agreement from wherever it was to the application phase. And so that's why we figured, okay, you're doing that, then why not move the vegetation management requirement to the application phase? So thanks.
What's the repercussion if we just do it and they complain and say that's not consistent, if it's different?
We don't know yet. That is a question that some counties have asked, and there's no answer yet, because no one's done it. I mean, I'm assuming that we open ourselves up for if someone met all those minimum standards, and if you guys said, this isn't the right seed mix, we recommend denial, and the county board goes, yeah, this is the wrong seeds, we're not gonna approve it, then I'm assuming we would be sued probably within the week, and the court would order us to go back and approve it. So that's the main concern.
How about the renaming of that document to match what the state?
That document is our internal document. We can do anything we
Okay,
want with that.
okay. So we don't need any vote.
And the state law does kind of point to those standards are gonna be dictated by IDNR.
So as far as the seed mix and all that, that'll probably be.
Well, they don't get that specific. I mean, the
DNR says that it's seeds that are sourced within 150 miles from the site, and it's really vague, like wildflowers and things like that, and ours is hyper specific and well done. And if there's some way for at least to like alert them during the application process, like, hey, we want to see this instead, you know?
But I
It's
guess
consistent, they're not at odds, but like, we want this seed mix.
ours is
specifically.
more specific, but the law's pretty clear that we can't require more than the state requires. So if IDNR doesn't require those very specific things, I don't know that we're on firm ground.
Does IDNR have site standards for years? Because we have site standards, we want to see maintenance agreements by year 3, by year 4, by year 5.
Yeah, they just have the maintenance schedule of what you do in year 1, what you do in year 2, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So are you saying, Renee,
But those
that
rules are supposed to be, what did we decide that, probably by the end of this month, they're supposed to be revised. So the IDNR rules.
so the IDNR rules could be changed to include something more like planting species?
They
and that
could
sort of
become more specific.
So is this something that maybe we'd want to delay until we see what those standards are going to be and what we can include? Is that, I mean, as far as the timeline, we got to make sure that we're allowing the county board plenty of time to approve this. Is this something we can wait and get more information?
Well, we were trying to get it to county board in April, so we would be in the clear, but we could send it to county board in May.
So isn't this issue about the seed mix something that we could inquire about at the hearing? Which would...
No, they wouldn't
which-
have to have their plan together at the hearing. If they don't have to have it till the building permit process, they wouldn't have to have any of their paperwork for site plan done at the hearing.
Understood, but could you not ask them about, well, what are your plans for it? So they can at least reveal that during the hearing, and then public can make comment on it.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be anything to stop you from.
Go ahead,
Well, we
Mr.
could ask
Croson.
about it, absolutely.
Just as DNR has multiple regional offices, my comment would be that the work of McHenry County should be shared with them. Apparently, the DNR was given a very narrow window to create these by statute, 90 days. And then in the meantime, we could see how accommodating the applicant is during the discussion process. If we have an applicant who closes the door on telling us anything of how they will behave in the building permit process, gives us one indication, versus one who wax eloquently about the prairies of McHenry County, we will know what direction that applicant would be going through this board.
I wonder if we couldn't inquire of IDNR whether our memorandum is consistent with their rules, or the rules they are process. Because if it is, then we can adopt it, I would think.
You mean our seed mix and all that stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea too.
I could assuage your concern here just a little bit. I didn't think to add this in, but I have been told that the IDNR, there's already been a contact made from McHenry County to the IDNR. The IDNR does want to look at what the county has already approved.
That's good.
So,
But could we direct staff to formally ask IDNR that question?
My opinion would be we can ask staff to do whatever is within the law. Inquiring IDNR.
No running and raping, huh?
Well, and then if we got a letter that said that our stuff was consistent with IDNR's, then we could just use ours.
Yeah, that was my thought.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
Can you do that for us, Renee, or have somebody do it?
You don't need a motion on that, we'll just ask
No.
you to do that. And maybe you can get that answered in the next week, and we can just address it next week, so that,
Okay.
when does the county board meets, next Tuesday?
You don't meet next week.
We aren't here.
Yeah, we're not here on the 23rd.
Okay, we don't meet till the 30th of this
Yeah.
month. But then, so they couldn't take it up until the 18th of May.
Right.
Is that a big concern?
It's
Still get
not,
on the April.
say again,
Couldn't it still get on the April agenda?
Yeah.
it could certainly
They
get on
do
the
it
April
on the
agenda.
Oh, yeah, this is March, so,
This
yeah,
is
that's
March.
April 18th, yeah, so, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so Renee, would you just get that for us, and as soon as you get an answer, then just put it on our calendar?
We do.
They do.
Um,
That's the, yeah, so these amendments will go under 30-day review, and then they'll come back, they'll go back through PED with whatever changes and discussion points, and then they'll go, that'll be the point where they go to the 30-day review. in April.
So it'll be
So it
May.
would be in effect in May
Yeah.
and adopted in May, one way or the other. So we can still make changes and have all those discussions. It would just
Yeah.
keep that same document.
Okay, okay.
Forgot
Okay.
that thing.
So is that it for you, Nancy? So is the end of your comments?
Yes, I believe I covered everything. Again, thanks for listening to me, and thanks for your good work on this.
Okay.
Thanks, Nancy.
Is there any other comments on members of the public?
Yeah, I have some.
Okay.
So, I'm Mary McCann, and most of you know me, and I'm actually making some comments on behalf of the
Maybe
Farm
you
Bureau?
give your ad, or on behalf of an organization?
Yeah, I'm on behalf of the Farm Bureau,
Okay.
okay? The Farm Bureau has, and I think they thought you had received these before, but I don't think you did. The Farm Bureau has been working and very concerned about this ruling that came down. And so they have been working with the Illinois Association of County Board Members to put together language that complies with the law. And they do have, still have some questions out there regarding especially stormwater, to address Nancy's concern. But one of the things that seems very clear from somebody standing out in the field here is that as you discuss the ordinance, the this late night arrival at a new demand from the solar and wind industry is that they are trying to work with a myriad of ordinances from all the different counties, all coming from it from a different point of view, and there's no consistency. And I think this was a reaction to that was not well explained to everybody. That's my reading of it. So I didn't talk to the person who worked with the Illinois Association of County Board Members, but what I passed out for everybody is a document that I think attempts to.
And this is a document prepared by Farm Bureau?
Yeah, no, it's, well, yes, as part of the, that, as a result of that meeting with, over several months with the Illinois Association of County Boards. And you got a copy of it, right, I assume? It's an attempt to get some consistent language, I think, into the ordinances of the county. You don't have to, not every county board or county, especially state's attorney, is going to agree with every part of this, and so this is not a legal document, just to be clear. But knowing that you all know the UDO, and I know a good portion of the UDO, I think it brings some consistency of language that all counties can use, and I think that's what the organization that Nancy mentioned is trying to do. And I wasn't going to go through the whole thing, but I was going to point out a couple of things that I've seen over the years that are really concerning to me, that protect the county. The county, I don't think, is well protected in some of the issues like the decommissioning. And the other concern I have is that the public doesn't finds sometimes the UDO difficult to maneuver because there are sections here and sections here, and they all apply, but you have to go back and forth. So I think this is an attempt to address those kinds of issues. The language in the setup is generic, so it would have to be worked into what the ordinance. But I'm going to mention a couple of things that I find kind of interesting. When neighbors do, like around the Duke Energy, they don't know which applies to them or just the people who own the property, and they feel left out. And one of the things they mention in here, through a definition, which I think is
And you
particularly
point to a
good.
page or
Right, and I'm
something.
going to, and that's on page 2. Non-participating property. And then down further, there's participating property. Non-participating property refers to the neighbors. What's going to happen, how they are protected. But by identifying them, I think it says, we are considering your interests in this whole process. That's for you to decide whether or not it should be in there. Obviously, in the contracts with solar energy especially, early on, some of the contracts were very convoluted, and some people didn't always go to an attorney who was familiar with that language. And so this brings a bit of consistency that protects them. And that's why they're identified in here specifically. You'll see a little later where within the requirements,
I think
they
I
will
need
get
you,
the,
Mary, when you're talking about this, to itemize specifically what you're talking about.
Okay, so
Generalizing is not
I'm going to do
good.
I went through the definitions, and I think, ones I would suggest are 8 to pay attention to are A, D, F,
Under definitions?
under definitions, and it goes on to page 2, H, J, K, L, M, and R.
There's 2 Ps, I don't know. if
There's
they
2
were-
Ps.
There are
in
2 Ps in it, I just noticed that, I didn't notice it. I just got this last night, so I did not have a chance to really look at it. I would move on to one of the things that you discussed a lot of the vegetation and kind of the aesthetics of the place, and that's on page 5 of this document. And notice that it's very specific, talking about, and our ordinance is probably not quite as clear, I think, clearly written as this. I think it's very good, and it, because it spells out exactly where the landscape is and who gets protected. And number 3.
You're speaking about number 1,
D3, excuse me.
D1 and D3.
D, correct. D3. In this case, this is pretty specific, and it talks about how the burial of the lines needs to is defined by the Ag Impact Mitigation Agreement. And that wasn't always clear, and I wasn't clear where it came in totally in all cases in your version. So that's why I highlighted it. As I said, didn't have enough time to go back and forth. I think one of the, because of what happened at Duke Energy and another community energy proposal that I dealt with when I was on the county board, the setback requirements tended to be not understood by the participants and the non-participants. So I thought section G on page 6, or it was also something that it clearly spells out. I think why it's not clear in the UDO is because it's in a
So
different
you're saying
spot.
G, number 1, you feel,
All
or
of
number
them,
2?
yeah, both of them. And then, this is hard to do in a hearing like this, but it was the best I had time to do. On page 8, when related to construction and whatnot, one of the things that is not well spelled out in the UDO for any construction are as-built maps and plans after there's a completion of the project. And I
You're
think this
speaking
is
of
vital.
O?
So I'm talking about O on page 8, as-built map and plans. They will change If there's a problem later on, and you don't have an as-built map, that's where the complaints get a bit annoying. On page 9, under operations,
Yes?
I think this, I'm not sure because I didn't check it out very clearly, but I think the annual report is vital.
Under maintenance?
It's under operations.
Operation A?
A,
Okay.
for maintenance, yes. And moving right along, let's see.
Mary, are you suggesting that we use the wording in this document?
Right,
in
I'll make sure,
our-
yeah, I think the wording would be helpful because if we're trying to it probably, some of it's probably compatible with what we've written, but if the counties start all using the same language, I think it would really help.
And you're saying all the counties are going to be using
I'm
this
not saying,
language?
I'm saying that's one of their goals, I think, that, they just started doing this, so it's, getting everybody on the same page is
Are
nearly
you-
impossible.
Are you confused as I am? I'm just trying to
Oh,
get
okay,
in my head, like, this is not Farm Bureau. Your Farm Bureau told you to come and tell us these
no,
changes are
I knew the
necessary?
Farm Bureau had worked on this. Okay, now that's the Illinois
So
Farm Bureau.
this is your changes that you recommend as a former county board member based on what Illinois
Okay,
Farm Bureau?
based on what I just looked at, based on what's written here, these are things that I thought needed to be also included. Okay, I probably didn't make that real clear.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's,
Yes, so this is the Illinois Farm Bureau. All the farm bureaus were sent this. They're all trying to get the word out. I understand that Dan Volkers has been talking to several people over here. Peter is one of them, Peter Austin. And so, but they were not aware of this hearing today, so.
Has the Illinois Farm Bureau officially adopted this document as their recommended ordinance for all counties?
Okay, so as I understand it, this is a recommendation because they don't want it to be taken as a legal document. It's just an opinion, but this is a consensus document that they worked out with the Illinois Association of County Board.
would it be fair just to ask staff to be in contact with Dan Volkers and Illinois Farm Bureau and just to see what their ultimate stance is going to be on this, maybe, and what their recommendation is based on what the state has been doing on these things?
Yeah, this is a lot more specific than our ordinance and is contradictory to some of the things that Renee said we
Right.
couldn't put in our
Yeah,
ordinance.
exactly.
Yeah, so.
Now, wait a minute, I didn't see where that was.
There's the noise section in
noise
section
levels,
K,
Mhm.
number 13, C13 on page 3, where you can add in a bunch of different county consultants to evaluate the siting application. It's just, it's a little bit inconsistent with what we just went through as far as like, we can't demand more. This demands a lot more of applicants than we were told we were able to.
Okay, so I was told this is what they've been looking at and thinking about, and that it was consistent with the state law. It
Well,
says,
let's just confirm that then. We'll just confirm that with,
okay,
to make sure, this might be things they like, but they don't know, like our staff knows what we can and can't do necessarily,
well,
so.
I would hope they
We're
would
also
know
sub-
what they can and cannot do.
We're also subject to the recommendations of our own state's attorney too, so you would have to look at that.
Right.
Go ahead, Mr. Cosmo.
And also the clock is established in the statute.
Yeah.
And so as much as we would want to pursue perfection, the clock is running.
Yes, I would agree.
Okay, so,
So would you be comfortable, Mary, with just our staff contacting Farm Bureau, Illinois Farm Bureau and saying,
right, yeah. So, yeah, and I would just say the last thing I would say is that, your decommissioning section, is, I think, very weak. Now, I'm not saying the new changes are, but, what you should go through, but I think that in plain English, every decommissioning plan usually has a site reclamation, and I think that says it all, and they put it into some language that I think is more methodical, so that looking at it, that it explains pretty much what they're trying to get through. And there are some other things that you could use for, well, according to this on page 13, there are some other things that you can use as triggers for decommissioning. So I would just ask you to, on behalf of them, and definitely talk to them. I just, during
So
what I
is,
thought was right.
is the board comfortable with Renee is checking on with the Department of Ag, also checking with the Farm Bureau?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I do have a couple of personal observations, and one is on page 10 of your packet, based on
Our packet or this
your
document?
packet, the zoning districts. So it looks as though you've negated all the singular wind energy systems. I understand you're putting it under accessories, but if a person is going to look it up and wants to put in a windmill, they're not going to look under accessories.
No, it's not under accessory. This is for a commercial wind energy facility. We just deleted large, micro, and mid-size and created commercial wind energy facility.
But in the original document, you had different systems. Now, if you strike those out, there's no wind energy anywhere. I see this as you striking these out. It would seem to say you need wind energy, accessories, and then let people know at least where they're allowed and if there's a conditional use.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Renee, but the changes we're making have nothing to do with the accessory uses.
It has nothing to do with those.
No.
The changes that are, just have to do with principal uses.
Yeah,
So
the only
if
thing
I'm
we're
a
changing is
farmer,
commercial.
If I'm a farmer and I want to put up a turbine, it's
Right.
regulated the
But
same.
I
as
know what you're
solar.
saying, but what I'm saying, if somebody looks at the use chart, you just cross these out.
That's the principal use chart.
Mary, I
Doesn't
had the same
include
concerns when I
accessories.
looked at it, and when
Okay.
Renee explained it, it made sense.
Okay.
Because what we're looking at for principal uses are commercial wind
Right.
farms, commercial solar, not farms.
No, I realize that. Aren't they all in the same use chart in the?
No.
No.
Okay. Then I somehow missed that. I didn't see that, yeah. Okay, that was one comment. I guess I have a question. I don't have any problem with the pollinators, but having returned from Chile and Peru and noticing that they actually graze and farm underneath I don't think that should be ruled out. I think that's something that should be considered, because if we continue with droughts and whatnot, our protein base, raising base is going to move toward the Midwest more
I
and
think
more.
that they're,
And so
again, we're
that-
handicapped by what the state is deciding under the Ag Impact Mitigation Agreement, correct?
Yeah.
And I agree with you completely. So, the 2050 plan, you guys are supposed to get a lot of information about, what they're calling agrivoltaics. That's the term that they've applied to it, where you can do things like graze animals under the farm, under the solar panels. So I don't think we have enough information to get that in the ordinance right now, but hopefully we will by the
Okay.
time we're done with the 2050 plan.
All right.
Hey, Mr. Cozen, you had a question?
I'm just, sorry, it wasn't so much a question, just an observation that the table has a header, and the header says principal use.
Yeah.
So it's
And I guess, and I didn't notice that difference in the, when I looked at the UDO chart on the web. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so since there's no other public, we will just continue this hearing until such time as you get a response, and then we'll reschedule this. Are we comfortable with that, or do we want to set a
We need
date?
to continue to a specific date, so.
Okay.
Continue the next day.
You want to do the 30th?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so this hearing is continued until March 30th at 1:30. At this time, the meeting is closed.
Let's hope it doesn't snow